Good evening. Welcome to Caribbean Impact. I speak this evening with three former government ministers in the People's Partnership Trinidad and Tobago government from 2010 to 2015, led by then Prime Minister Persad Bissessar, now opposition leader, who today faces one of the biggest challenges of her political career, having lost yet another election. This evening's episode aims to unpack the systemic and structural challenges currently engulfing the opposition United National Congress. Can they ever again be a viable option? Here with me this evening to unpack this topic are Ramona Ramdial, former MP for Couva North, who has served at the Ministries of Planning, Gender and the Environment; Devant Maharaj, former UNC Senator, Minister of Food Production, former Minister of Transport; and Vasant Bharath, former UNC MP for St. Augustine, former Minister of Trade and Industry. Over the last few weeks, we have seen billboards against CAMLA popping up across Trinidad and Tobago, protesters from the opposition canvassing against their political leader, contentious internal debates in the UNC on the continued streak of electoral failures on the part of their party, political pundits blaming pie-in-the-sky promises, poor candidate selection, and unruly platform behavior for the UNC's 11th electoral defeat, as growing calls emerge for CAMLA to go. Devant, perhaps I can start with you. I understand you've claimed responsibility for the billboards against CAMLA. Is that a prudent use of resources? What impact do you anticipate this will have? And why do you think this is necessary?
National discussion focused on the UNC, its leadership, and its past behavior building up to and after the election. And bearing in mind that a vibrant, credible opposition is needed in any Westminster-type democracy. It is the check and balance of potential abuses of the state. So it is indeed the best use of resources to ensure that we have an opposition party that can be best suited to hold the government's feet to the fire when they transgress in any form or fashion. So in that regard, the use of the billboards have started with one initial billboard and have cascaded the discussion and sent ripple effects throughout the length and breadth of the UNC at its very core. And by the end of this week, when other billboards go up across the country, we expect that the level of conversation to be heightened, to be focused on issues that affect the party internally, that resulted ultimately in, once again, the party being defeated at the polls.
Mm-hmm. So, Ramona, I have a question for you. In a recent op-ed in the Guardian newspaper entitled "Time to Let Members Speak," Ramdial tells CAMLA election campaign a disaster. You've been calling for post-election analysis. Why is that?
Well, first and foremost, in 2015, when we lost the general election, that was part of the party's agenda to have a post-election analysis moving forward. So we know where we went wrong and that we could have planned properly for 2020. That never took place. And here we are in 2020, another electoral loss and no post-election analysis after 1 month. So as a party, the members are asking to speak with the leadership. I mean, we have been throughout the country. People call us, they message us. We know our former constituents have been an MP for the past 10 years. So our membership wants to speak to the leadership. They want to know again, after 2 consecutive losses, where we went wrong, what we did, and how we can right those wrongs moving forward. Because in 2025, it's another general election. And there are many instances over the past 5 years. I have not been as vocal as some of my former colleagues, including Devant, who is here with us tonight, former MP Fuad Khan, former MP Ganga Singh, when they called for unity in 2017. Many people have said, well, okay, you're now speaking out. Why are you now speaking out? But as a former member of parliament, inside, I spoke together with my former colleagues. We gave suggestions, we gave ideas. We spoke to some of our former UNC colleagues who were on the outside between 2015 and 2020. So we have been doing our jobs on the inside and not necessarily speaking out. But now that I am now a former MP, and I'm now a private citizen, I have to find other platforms in which to help my party move forward and to fix all that has gone wrong over the past 5 years.
Thank you, Ramona. Vasant, I have a question for you. As a former Minister of Trade, you understand more than most the implications of the economic fallout from COVID-19. We are experiencing the worst economic situation the country has ever seen, with a 15 billion hole in the economy. From the perspective of an opposition, why is it vital, do you think, for the opposition to present a credible team in the midst of this crisis?
Well, Piers, we live in a very small society. Unfortunately, we are divided predominantly across racial lines, and that was borne out in terms of how we voted in the 2020 election. The realities of life is that unless you have the best people in the room, you're not going to get the best possible solutions moving forward. So if it is that you have people in the parliament who are unable to hold their own, then as Devant said, you could essentially have a runaway government whose plans and policies are inimical to the well-being of the country moving forward. And so therefore it's important to have the quality and caliber of people in the opposition who can hold the government to account on the policies that they put in place and the lack of implementation that we might see going forward. We are at a critical juncture, as you rightly say, where we are going to be competing with the rest of the world for very scarce resources. This is not a situation where just Trinidad and Tobago is in a recession. The entire world is going to be in a recession. Everyone is going to be looking to acquire scarce resources that is not going to be freely available. We talk about scarce resources related to human talent, related to capital, related to foreign direct investment and local investment. And you need to have an edge as a country going forward because you're competing with the rest of the world. And so that's why it's critical that we have a strong opposition and that the UNC over the years could have reformed itself, if not to be in opposition, but certainly be in the government. And I've been advocating change since 2015, as all of you will know. I came out openly and challenged the status quo because I felt that, in the same way that Ramona said that no post-analysis of the defeat in 2015 took place, no analysis of any defeat took place going back to January 2013, when we lost the Tobago House of Assembly elections by 12-0, an election, I might add, that we expected to win, which really, when you think you're going to win an election by a landslide and you actually lose all of the seats and you do no analysis subsequent to that, it tells you that something is wrong and that the leadership is fearful, but really trying to analyze why the loss took place. And then, of course, why subsequent losses took place. Because in that particular year, in 2013, we lost the THA election, we lost the by-election in St. Joseph, we lost to Jack Warner in Chaguanas West, and then we lost 5 local government corporations. We went from 11 to 6, all in 2013, whilst we were in the incumbent government, and yet still we never sat down as a team and did any analysis of why the organization continued to lose. And of course, we saw what happened in 2015 and subsequently.
That's a very good contribution, because it leads me on to showing a video of actually Mrs. Persad Bissessar's sort of complaint against former UNC leader Basdev Pandey.
They lost 4 times. The present leader has lost for our party. In 2001, lost. 2002, lost. 2003 local, lost. 2007, lost. And you want to talk about track record and trench? How are you going to go forward come next election if we keep the status quo and keep the present leader? What will happen? Lost again.
For CNC3, I'm Sanjay Mahaber.
Open this out to a wider conversation with your colleagues, Vasant, Devant, Ramona. What is your perspective on that contribution?
Well, it's full circle. You know, it's that vicious cycle that we see happening ever so often in the history of all political parties. And I think the time has come where we need to look at new leadership of the party. In 2015, we went forward with the incumbent because personally, I believe that she deserved a chance in opposition. Then, you know, we were all rooting behind her. At the end of it, you know, most of the party got back together before the 2020 general elections. But then again, your poor decision-making process, a host of other factors that led to the loss in 2020 begs for new leadership. And not just the political leader, but the entire executive of the United National Congress.
Devant, what about you?
The issue really is that we have had a situation where the political leader presiding over the government in waiting have failed the membership. A political party is established for one purpose, to win elections, ultimately to win government, be it either local or at the national level. You do not fight an election to come in second place. Second place is not a consolation prize. We are not in the Olympics where a bronze and a silver medal is a badge of honor. And having run up against a wall, not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but 11 times, that should have telegraphed a message to the leadership of the party that something is inherently wrong with the decision-making process and strategies employed to carry us over the finish line first. That has not happened, and it continues to not happen. On the last occasion, rightly as Ramona said, we decided to give Ms. Persad Bissessar an opportunity to perform in opposition because she never had that opportunity.
Yeah.
Because straight as coming in leader of the party, there was an immediate election and she came in as Prime Minister. So we afforded her that opportunity to be leader of the opposition. And we started to see a continuation of the failed strategies of the Chaguanas by-election, the failed strategies of the THA election, the failed strategies of the St. Joseph election, the failed strategies of the various local elections and by-elections, and ultimately the election of 2015, continuing between the period of 2015 to 2020. The decision-making and choices of the political leader has come into serious question by persons as myself, and I'm sure Vasant wouldn't disagree or disagree much far from what I'm saying, and Ramona. So at this point in time, if we want to ensure that this political party, which we all belong to, returns into governance and intervention from those who have not drunk the Kool-Aid and believe our own story, we need to intervene at this point in time.
But P.S., I am really hoping that when the announcement is made for the internal elections, probably later this year, that the leader would nicely step aside and allow for the party to throw up a new leader. That is what I hope for, because our political party, we have a process and we must abide by that particular process. And it is my hope that she steps aside and allow for the party to choose a new leader.
Yes, the deep-rooted problems that the party suffers is a direct result of a lack of institutional strength. No working institutions in the organization. And I know Ramona said that she may have at times registered concerns, but I can guarantee you those concerns were not really taken on. Ramona might have just registered it, and I guarantee you that she might have been sidelined for a period of time for even registering those concerns. The reality is, many of the party supporters say, well, why don't you speak about these things internally? Why are you raising these things publicly? The reality is that there are no forums, no genuine forums in which to air these grievances or even make valid comments once they are contrary to what the leadership of the party thinks is the direction that the party must be going in. So you have a group of people that's loosely termed the national executive of the party. Essentially, they are all waiting to hear or think what the political leader thinks before they would give their opinion, because their opinion has to be in line with that of the political leader. No organization can survive for too long where all of the decision making resides purely in the ambit of the political leader and what the political leader says and does. Ultimately, of course, it is the political leaders or the leader's neck on the chopping block. And ultimately, the decisions must be his or hers. And he or she must take full responsibility for those decisions. But you must respect the opinions of others within the grouping, because everyone has an opinion, may at some point in time have relevance that you may not have considered. And you will take that into account with the decision-making process. But when you surround yourself with a group of people whose only intention is to tell you what you want to hear, then you have only one way for an organization to go, and that is the way the UNC is going.
Mm-hmm. One of the Facebook comments just said a moment ago, I think it was Lisa, that the UNC doesn't present itself as a sort of a national party. And I'm going to open these questions out to all of you, but I'll start with Devant, because I think in a previous public engagement, you said that the UNC doesn't have appeal beyond its base. Yes, Lisa Jones. So during this election, you had mentioned that the UNC was only frequenting their strongholds to canvass. What did you mean by that? And in your side,
I want to go back further.
Okay.
That when Vasant Pandey, in his twilight years, had the helm of the was at the helm of the party.
Mm.
The party held meetings in Arima Dial, in a constituency that they never won. They had meetings in Sandy Grande in front of Royal Castle. They never won. They had meetings in Sawa Kwezi, which was a marginal seat, in Tunapuna by the El Dorado Cooperative, in Hilo, St. Augustine, in Digo Martin. We fought an election, I believe Jolene John may have been the candidate, Vasant is probably correct, in Tobago. So Vasant Pandey, rooted in Central and South Trinidad with an agrarian labor-based party, took the UNC by the scruff of its neck and dragged it onto the corridor and established it there. That was the shoulders that Kamala Persad Bissessar stepped on when she assumed the mantle of leader. And what we have seen progressively since 2010 to 2020 is a erosion of the UNC's presence onto the East-West corridor from a national party, as Pandey had carried it in the national psyche to be, to now retreating, a hasty retreat into further than central, now to deep south, a party. And you see it manifest in how the party conducts its business. So we are no longer in Tobago, right? And why is that? They have no Indian in Tobago, so we do have candidates. So by that logic, we shouldn't have candidates in Laventille and Port of Spain and so on. But that is a foolish position to take, in my respectful view, of a national party. The PNM, conversely, does not hope to ever win Pinal and Debe and Urupuch, but they have a presence there. If they are called upon to get people from all over Trinidad, they can so do. The UNC has now handicapped itself by cutting off Tobago from the party in a substantial manner. When they hold meetings in non-UNC areas on the corridor, they have those meetings confined to the enclaves where there's an Indian presence. So if it's in La Haketa Talparo, it's in the Las Lomas side. If it's in St. Joseph, it's in Bangladesh. If it's in the Sama Bharat area, it is in Aranguez, and so on. And this works against the expansion of the base in a real and meaningful way. If we are to attract people across the nation, regardless of color, creed, race, we cannot adopt this kind of communal position in the party. And it is as if the leadership is fearful of not being well received without taking the chance of offering your wares, so to speak, on the corridor.
Ramona, I was about to ask you a question based on a comment on your article, and a comment from Scott McDonald says there have been many allegations in the past of vote rigging in the UN internal elections. Is the panel concerned about this? This was I was going to segue into your comment about challenges with democracy in the internal UNC structure, because you had described it as being in a state of disrepair.
No, but when I said it was in a state of disrepair, I was referring to what Vasant spoke about. The institutions of the party, the arms of the party, they've been stifled over the past 5 years. We have not had a national assembly in 5 years. We have not had a youth national assembly, a women's national assembly, and even the national congress that we've had on a yearly basis has been structured in a way where the constituency executives and members can't speak to the leadership. So at the end of the day, when you attend a national congress, it's like a glorified political meeting where certain executive members, MPs, and the political leader will speak, and that's it. And even the motions that are brought by the various constituencies to be passed, they were initially vetted by the NATEX, and they have to be agreed upon by the NATEX. And as a young woman being part of the United National Congress, that was never the process before. So it was a much more democratic party before. And that is why I said over the past 5 years, the democracy of the party has been greatly eroded. And we need to have these arms and the institutions of the party working again. And that's the only way we can get feedback from members. I just saw a comment from one of your Facebook viewers that this is why the opposition will always be in opposition. And I want to assume that person is referring to the three of us who are here on your panel tonight. But I want to tell that individual that if we don't speak about the issues that are plaguing the UNC that does not allow us to win elections, then what do? We need to speak. We need to have this vented. And that is why I'm calling so strongly for a post-election analysis. Talk to your members, speak to your members, just as we are doing it here, and we have COVID protocols to adhere to. We can do it like we are doing right now, have panel discussions, have Zoom meetings, and find a way to speak to the membership so that we can move forward to 2025.
Vasant, I think that this gives me a good opportunity to ask you, how can the UNC re-energize itself and rebuild its party machinery to become an effective opposition that can hold the government to account?
I think two fundamental things. Yes, one is that the party needs to go to the ground and re-engage its supporters, and also cast its net a little bit further than it has in the past, so we can genuinely bring other people outside of the normal base into the organization, but do it in a genuine and sustained manner. So it's not just cosmetic for a Monday night forum or for an election campaign, but it's over a period of time. It does require officers of the party, including the leadership of the party, going to the ground, engaging people, building the institutions as Ramona spoke about. I'm talking about party groups, I'm talking about constituency executives, empowering the constituency organs to work, empowering the various institutions of the party like the women's arm and the youth arm and others, and not just have them there as theoretical organs of the party that you hold up at a National Assembly time and you get someone to come out and read out something supporting the, something that would just support the leader, we support the leader, and so on. You need to engage people genuinely. The second thing is, in my opinion, and I've said this since 2015, the party has lost a significant amount of trust between the electorate and the party. Now, you're always going to get the base who will come out and vote, because we know in Trinidad and Tobago, as is the case in Guyana and some of the other islands where you have large numbers of mixed populations like we have in Trinidad. When I say mixed, predominantly two races, you're going to get on both sides people voting for their party because they see it almost as treachery. Not to, in fact, I will tell you, within the ranks of the UNC, if you speak out, you are a traitor. You are deemed to be a traitor. You are what they call Imakaram, as coined by Sandy. So the reality is that we have to go out there, be honest with ourselves as to the state of the party. That is critical. Be honest. You know, there was something. There's something called a Stockdale syndrome, and it relates to a quote from a guy called James Stockdale, who was imprisoned in the Vietnam War, Admiral James Stockdale. And he basically said that, you know, you must never lose sight and hope that you will win in the end, but you must have the discipline to confront brutally the challenges of your current situation. And that is something that the UNC has run from traditionally, challenging brutally the circumstances of our current situation. And until you can do that, you're going to continue to move further and further south. You are going to alienate yourself more and more from those people who will cause you to win an election, because they're no longer at a point where they're even going to hold their noses and vote for you. They've written you off completely. And we have to be honest with ourselves, understand the underlying problems, and start to address them in a meaningful way and engage people in that process.
Vasant, I guess this is a good opportunity for us to bring in the video where I think Kamala had criticized you for running against her.
She acknowledged there were mistakes that caused the party to lose government in 2015, but she did not take full blame.
Take your blame too and ask the other 18 MPs. Do they blame Kamala because they won their seats? They won their seats and watch them. 18 MPs won their seats, but he couldn't win a seat in St. Joseph and want to blame me.
So, you know, you've made a lot of musings about the need for a strong opposition. Perhaps you can go into more detail about what that means in a moment. But first, I must ask, is this coming from a place of political jealousy? After all, you weren't able to beat Mrs. Persad Bissessar twice in an internal election battle.
Actually, it was just one, to correct you. I only fought in 2015 against her. We pulled out in 2017 because of massive irregularities in the entire process with regard to production of the lists and production of people's addresses and email accounts and many other irregularities, which I highlighted at that point in time. So my entire team pulled out in 2017. Look, if you are part of an organization, unless it's a fet match, which is you're just going to have fun on a Sunday afternoon and you're going to have a few drinks and line with some friends and so on. But if you are involved seriously in an organization where you are going to give your time and effort, where you are going to be making serious sacrifices as far as family time is concerned, where you are going to be, as I have done, others have done, contributed significantly financially to the running of the party in the dark days when there were no monies to pay salaries and PNZ and pay electricity bills and so on. It was just a few of us funding that expenditure. When you make those kind of sacrifices, you want to be in an organization that's positioning itself to win. As I said earlier on, you're in politics to win. You're not in politics to stay in opposition in perpetuity, because the reason you're in politics is because you believe that you have a role to play in the improvement of people's lives by the implementation of certain policies that you truly believe in, and that you believe that your party is in a better position to implement than your competitor. If you do not give yourself a fighting chance because you continue to make serious errors of judgment, then clearly you are putting yourself at a major disadvantage to be in pole position to win. And so that is the issue. I have absolutely no jealousy or envy. I have many things in life I could be doing. I truly believe that this country is in a position, a very perilous position, even particularly after COVID-19, or during this pandemic, where we need the best hands on the table and in the room. And you're only going to get out of where we are if we do that, if we apply the best minds and we have the best solutions to the problem, because we are fighting with the rest of the world for those scarce resources, as I spoke about before.
Yes, yes. So, Devant, and if you guys would like, you can answer some of the questions that some of the viewers are thinking, so feel free to do so. But I do have a question for you, and it's a broader question that I will ask you as well, Ramona. What are your thoughts, as Vasant has expressed, about what the UNC can do to reinvent itself in light of your previous answer where you spoke about them only appealing to their base?
Well, the UNC has to take a hard, introspective position in terms of that critical self-examination. And I think Ramona pointed us in the direction. The party's constitution has the mechanisms to make the party provide the forums, which a couple of your Facebook viewers are asking about what forum we have. It has it. It says clearly every 3 months, all the youth officers are supposed to come together, all the women's officers, all the PRO, but it has not been happening. Every year there's supposed to be a national executive, a national congress. The national executive right now is improperly and unlawfully constituted, in my respectful view. It says in addition to the portfolio officers, you're supposed to have 10 members without portfolio. That doesn't happen. The General Secretary and the PRO, part of the Secretariat, should not be members of Parliament. That is in our Constitution. So within the body of the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution had put in place a document that provided the structure for accountability, for various fora, for discussion and disagreement, and to hold the party leadership accountable to the members. What we have had over the last 10 years is a successive erosion of these guardrails of the internal democratic process of the party. And because many of us in the first 5 years were so preoccupied with the business of governance, we were not focused in that direction. And in the 5 years that followed, we were so busy in the business of opposition, we continued to allow the political leadership to continue to erode those guardrails of democracy within the party to a point now where we got up suddenly and it's a one-woman show. And we don't have the forum. We don't have the regular meetings. We don't have the discussion. We cannot, there's no body within an organ of the party where we have that. So if we are to strengthen the party and reinvent the party, we have to go back to our fundamental principles of having the party well structured, and that structure having been abandoned by the current leadership is an indication that they have no interest, will have no interest, and will never have an interest of implementing those things. And we need now a team to challenge Ms. Persad Bissessar, because I have no doubt that she will go up again, to present to the membership that if elected, they will institute these various organs of the party where they can hold the party leadership accountable at every step of the way. And the party should not be synonymous with the members of parliament, which has happened over the last couple of decades.
Let me just interject there. Devant is right in everything that he has said with respect to the party's institutions and how we can go about improving them. Let me also say that between 2015 to 2020, the NATEX took a decision where no sitting MP could have been a NATEX member. So you had the MPs that were separated, and the executive of the party were a bunch of new persons without MP portfolios. Come 2020, what we are now seeing a month after the general election is that those said MPs who were previously and who are NATEX members and are now MPs are still holding on to the NATEX positions. And whilst I understand that an internal election will deal with that, you have, as Devant mentioned, the PRO and the General Secretary at this time who needs to step aside before the internal elections so that we can have the party's business being run in a sort of normal way at this time. So the GenSec and the PRO, they don't have to wait for an internal elections to step aside and allow for a new GenSec and a new PRO to hold the reins in terms of the responsibilities of the office.
And my addendum to that is, if we are presenting ourselves as a political party where we will be custodians and stewards of the national constitution, have no respect for our own party constitution, then we lose credibility. If we do not honor and venerate our party constitution properly and give it life, how can we tell the national community that we will respect the national constitution? And that is a serious problem.
You know, I wanted to sort of just add here, because of course there's this general narrative that Kamala must take a back seat and allow the party to rebuild and reinvigorate itself. But there was also mention of the inexperience of the politicians that have been selected. So my question is, let's say Kamala does step aside. What then is the plan for the party, and how the opposition operates under those circumstances when she does indeed depart? Because you're still left with the structures of inexperienced politicians. What then do you do?
And that's a major problem. I think we'll all have to agree, and it's a problem heaped upon us by the leadership of the party, deliberately so, as Martin Daly said in one of his columns, as an insurance policy, so that if she lost the election, she would have these young, inexperienced people around her in the parliament who would put their arms around her and protect her, and that is exactly what has happened. So you now have a situation through her own making. She has foisted upon the people of Trinidad and Tobago through the parliament a group of inexperienced people, many of whom really, quite frankly, ought not to even have been in a regional corporation. But they're now sitting in the halls of parliament debating bills of importance that can potentially impact all of our lives, or maybe not even contributing in many instances because they're not able to do so, again, impacting many of our lives. And so therefore, we are now in a situation where her position is, well, I've got to now look after these young people. It's a situation all of her own making. The only people who are suffering through all of this is going to be the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because we don't have the caliber of representation that's going to be required to, as I say, keep the government on its toes and debate on behalf of and bring laws that are beneficial to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So, in answer to your question, we are caught between a rock and a hard place in the UNC, but we've got to start somewhere. We can't allow that to be the excuse not to start the rebuilding process. And it's going to be painful. There's no two ways about it. It's going to be painful for everyone. For us, this is not an easy task that we embarked on. We don't take it lightly that we're out here talking about the party and the rebuilding process, but it's got to start, and somebody's got to take the bull by the horns and start to make it happen.
You see, this is a very challenging conversation because, the national population always asks, we need new blood in the politics. And here is an attempt, it seems, by Mrs. Persad Bissessar to do so. And then you also have this challenge where there's this question of inexperience.
I don't think that's the difficulty we have, and that's I think erroneous. The problem is competency.
Right.
That sure you could get new faces if you go to any secondary school. Choose the last percentile. There's new faces. You don't want that. Have they replaced? And I'm just using this. Let's say in the face of what's his name, Vivek Charan, the Sama Businessman Association. He, when you hear his name across the board, or Rival Chattergoon from Arima, you get an idea of what that person represents. They are new faces, they are young person, or Valmiki Arjun. You get an impression of somebody coming to the table at that point in time with a degree of competency and achievement personally. What we are presented with is persons who questions were raised about their conduct in the past and not bringing an asset to the table, but actually a liability that the party was oblivious and refused to address and foisted on the national population. I am still getting complaints today by people in Kumuto, Manzanilla, saying, why did the party bring a doctor from Chaguanas why they could not find somebody from the constituency? And it is replicated across the board. We had Mr. David Naked, who was in transit to somewhere, some part of the world, got stuck here because of the lockdown, and we grab him up and we make him a senator today after being a candidate. When the party say you have to be a member for a year before you go up for general elections. So if we are prepared to break our own rules when it's expedient, do you think the national population will trust us if we present this? We have to be true to our own philosophy. And the conscience of the party will unfold on internal election day. And the party membership will show its hand if they are prepared to do what is right or to do what is expedient for power. The easiest thing for all of us, Vasant, myself, Ramona, was to stay quiet and play ball, and hope that somebody offer you a little 10 days in the Senate or a little regional corporation, work on the side, or work as a research officer in some MP, because all the MPs so incompetent, they need competent research officers. Silence was the easiest thing to buy. This road that has been traveled upon. It's a very difficult road, and we have experience with Ramesh, Jack, and Gypsy when they forced Basdeo Pandey to have an internal election in 2009. So this is, we've had precedent in our party of holding leaders to account, and this people are critical of our articulation of this position. But democracy cannot be reduced only to voting once every 2 years or 5 years. It has to also embrace wholeheartedly the free and frank expression of dissenting opinions from that of the leadership. It is only through that thesis and antithesis of dialectics will you have a growth in the organization.
Ramona, I wanted to ask you really quickly. So it seems that what you guys are discussing is that the UNC seems to have an image problem with the national community. What do you think needs to be done to regain the trust of the electorate?
Well, I think, okay, so let's look at this general election gone past and the candidates that were chosen. First of all, 10 NATEX candidates were selected. 7 out of that 10 NATEX candidates won. So we have 7 NATEX members who are now MPs sitting in the parliament. Out of those 7 NATEX members, we have many that came into electoral politics with baggage. I'm not going to identify who they are, but you know what I'm speaking about. And the PNM during their campaign aired the dirty laundry of these particular candidates. And when you look at the UNC campaign strategy, there was no one, even those said candidates, to reply to the PNM campaign of corruption and allegations of corruption. So you had some of my former colleagues who are there who were retained with corruption allegations over their heads. And then you had these new candidates coming in with their baggage of corruption allegations. That is something that the UNC has been suffering from for the past 15 years or so. We have not moved away from choosing candidates that are clean, filled with integrity. Some are, not all, some I'm talking about. And the question is why? We need to ask ourselves why. Why are we subjecting the party every 5 years by choosing these risky candidates, and then you give fodder to the PNM and other parties on their political platform? And when you look at the UNC campaign, there's no one to respond to that. Because let me tell you, those 7 Natex candidates, none of them spoke during the campaign, the election campaign, with the exception of 1 or 2. The others who were identified as those with baggage coming in, they were not allowed to speak during the campaign. They were not even allowed to speak to media that were looking for them to ask certain questions so that they can be introduced properly to the general public.
Ramona,
There was a gag order on many of them. And that is the vexatious things that we have to work with as a party. I'm
going to ask you this, Ramona, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond to it, because this has been a conversation that's happening behind the scenes. Of course, there's some folks who are favorable to Mr. Persad Bissessar who say that you're only speaking out now because you didn't get selected for the Couva North seat, and what would you respond to that?
First of all, I will say that I am speaking out now because I don't have that platform that I once had when I was inside to speak. So let me clear the air. I spoke a lot on the inside. I gave suggestions, I gave ideas, I supported my colleagues, and as Vasant identified, none of it was taken into consideration. And we are now feeling the effects of that. Now that I am out of it, I am finding new platforms in which to air those said concerns. So our members need to understand that we need to speak, we need to air these issues, we need to create conversations so that we can fix our party moving forward. Because let me tell you something, those in the current leadership right now wants us to stay quieter. And as Devant really said, we could have taken a choice and remain silent and see the party be defeated again in 2025. So
yes, I think, yeah. I just want to interject for a moment here, Ramona. The real question that we should be asking ourselves is, why wasn't Ramona reselected as a candidate? What did she do that did not find favor with the selection committee that she should not have been returned? Did they tell her what she didn't do during the last 5 years to not be returned? Did they measure her performance? Was she found guilty of any corrupt activity or even have allegations against her head? And this is the problem. This is the problem in the party. This is because I may not like this one, or that person might have said something that's upset me. That's it for that person. This is a one-man show. And that is why the party is in the condition that it's in. Why did Fazal Karim not get selected for Chaguanas East? What did he do that resulted in his expulsion? Fazal Karim was one of the most successful government ministers during the People's Partnership. He was an excellent member of parliament in the last 5 years by all accounts. What was it that he did or he did not do that caused his him not to be reselected? And those are the real issues we've got to ask ourselves. What are the fundamentals on which you make these decisions are made? And you see, the repercussions of the party are grave going forward, because you replace someone with like Ramona or Fazal with people who are not of the same caliber. The party suffers, its supporters suffers, and the outside world, and I say the outside, well, I mean outside of the base, does not see you in the light that you ought to be seen as a genuine alternative to the government. And these are the issues that create the credibility problem.
Vasant, as I interject, the constituency executive of Couva North, I had unanimous support. I had unanimous support from the constituency itself. I had endorsements from religious leaders, NGOs, CBOs. The entire constituency executive supported me to be reselected. And in the face of that, they ignored the wishes of the constituency executive. So that's another aspect we need to look at. Again, you have ignored the party structure, the arms of the party, and where you have a constituency executive that plays such an important role in the selection of candidates, you had the entire leadership of the UNC ignoring that. Even after the decision was made, when they tried to meet to speak before nomination day to see what was going on or to be given answers, I myself am waiting on an answer. I was given a one-line. I was told, well, we need to make space for new people, and that was it. That was it. There was no explanation as to why I was not elected, because there was, as far as I'm concerned, I did everything right, you know. So the constituency executive, another arm of the party, have been totally ignored, and not just in Couva North, in Komoto Manzalina, in other constituencies, they were totally ignored.
But
I think
yes, if the argument is that Ramona is speaking out because she didn't get the seat which she screened for, what would be the argument for Vasant or myself, who screened for nothing? We never indicated that we wanted a seat. We never filed documents, and we never screened. So the attacks that we are getting is on the messengers and not on the message. So they would attack Ramona and say she didn't get the seat. That is what she's talking about. But they are not addressing the substantial issues raised by Ramona. They would attack me, but they are not addressing the constitutional infringement and the violent rape on a repeated basis of the UNC constitution. They would not address the issues raised by Vasant. So we have to separate the attacks on the messengers, which we are all prepared to bear, but we have to also, in the same breath, notice the leadership ignoring the messages that's being carried forward.
Devant, just as you of messengers, and we're coming to the end of this discussion. But before I get there, I wanted to ask you, because of course there are a lot of questions about whether or not it is you who runs the UNC cabal page that is exposing various, entities and machinations that are happening in the internal politics. What do you have to say about that?
Anything I do, I put my name to it. When I attack, I want you to know I am attacking. I want paternity for it. I want credit for it. I will not allow somebody to attack anonymously on my behalf.
Okay, that's fair enough. Vasant, just coming to you really quickly. Many people across Trinidad and Tobago see you as a truly bipartisan politician who's not only patriotic, but is prepared to lend support toward national development and recovery. We need only look at your contribution to the Road to Recovery team. But why isn't this enough for the UNC?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of the question?
Why isn't your bipartisanship and the way that you do politics enough for a seat at the table in the UNC?
Because the politics practice is completely different to what I believe in. I think that we're too small a country to be so different, or certainly at different ends of the pole of the spectrum with regard to what's best for the citizens of this country. Ultimately, we are a two-party system. And ultimately, yes, I'm a member of the UNC, and so is Devant, and so is Ramona, and others. But the reality of life is that we all have to live together, whether it's red or yellow. Tomorrow morning, we all have to go to the grocery. Tomorrow morning, we all have to leave our homes, and an atrocity isn't committed against us. And so, therefore, we all feel that we have the better opportunity as a party to be able to present that to the population. Ultimately, however, we ought not to be criticizing just for the sake of criticism. We must have, I always say we're still practicing buddies politics that existed in the 60s today, where when an election rolls around, you quickly print your face on a mug or on a pencil and you hand it out, and the votes are automatic. People are far more disciplined today. People have greater expectations today of what representation should look like. People have people expect more from their members of parliament than they did in the past. Unfortunately, we have a situation in Trinidad and Tobago that both parties feel that they can wake up tomorrow morning with 16 or 17 seats in the bag, regardless of what they practice and what they say and how they behave and how they conduct themselves and what they do in the parliament. They wake up tomorrow morning with 16 seats or 17 seats. More so the UNC, because the PNM have actually lost on two separate occasions in 1986 when their base did not come out to vote in the numbers that they've done traditionally, and in fact they lost their traditional PNM seats. And also in 2010 that was the case. UNC base has never moved, and therefore the UNC leadership takes that base for granted as a direct result, because they know that tomorrow morning, regardless of what they do, they wake up with 16 or 17 seats, and all they now have to look to do is to fight to gain 5 or 6 seats to get into government. My position is very different. My position is, listen, we have scarce resources in this country. Look at the level of development that has taken place in the last 50 years by comparison to the amount of money that has been spent in Trinidad and Tobago, and you will recognize that it's not money well spent in terms of what we have gotten in return for what we've spent. And a lot of that has to do with our politics. So one government says, okay, we are going to build the Brian Lara Stadium, and leaves it, they come out of government, leave it half finished. The other government comes and say, right, that's it, we're not dealing with that again. We're going to leave that as a white elephant to show the population how you've squandered money. And so it's hundreds of millions of dollars that's being spent. And I think what this country needs is an agreement going forward of the areas and the sectors that the government needs to spend on to improve the quality of life of our people. And governments that come in, maybe they can tweak it, but they're going to be measured on how they perform in delivering those goods and services to the population. But you can't come and radically change things unless the population finds a way to agree that something needs to be changed radically because something has happened in the world that has caused that radical shift in direction. We're a small country. The direction in which we go can be easily agreed upon for 1.3 million people that live here. What are the things that are important? Food is important, medication is important, transportation, education. What's the underlying philosophies to make those things happen, to deliver in the most effective and efficient way? It can't be our positions can be so divergent as to cause such massive disruptions when one government leaves and one takes over. And it's simply politics that causes that. And the people that get squeezed are the people in the middle, and that's the population. So my philosophy is that we have to find a way to work together for the benefit of the population. We won't always agree on policy prescription, but we must find generally a way that we can utilize the scarce resources we have to the benefit of more of our people.
Would you both agree with that perspective?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Watching one of the comments, one of your viewers asked if the Pandays were to return. I think the Pandays formed their own party, and they're proceeding with that. I guess if they apply to the party, I don't see the political parties, in order to win election, have to continuously be all embracive and reaching out. So I would assume that if they are so inclined, they would be welcome along with anybody else. The other question that was asked is if Vasant or Ramona would take up the mantle of leadership. Well, I guess we would see that unfolding as the internal election, we hope, which is constitutionally overdue for the NATEX and which is due for the political leader in November of this year. We will see if it is called, if and when it is called. who among the contenders would put out their head. I see another question here. What is your respective political plans if Kamala wins the internal election and remains the leader of the UNC? I intend to have to remain as a UNC. In Trinidad and Tobago, third party is for car insurance. So it's either PNM or UNC. I drop my bucket with the UNC, and I will continue to agitate for change within the UNC. And even if the result isn't what we want, I think perhaps just having the discussion may force changes that we would have agitated for, and highlight the need for democratization of the party inside. And for those who are asking us to leave and form a next party, I would say I would follow them first.
Yeah.
I
want to with my colleagues Vasant and Devant, and also to add again, as I said, as I began, that I'm very hopeful that the political leader will step aside when the internals are announced. And I also want to say that our party, has been deeply fractured over the past 5 years. We need to unite the party. We need to bring everyone back in. We just need to take a page also and look to see what other political parties are doing. I mean, if you look at the PNM, you would have seen for this general election, Dr. Rowley brought back in Penelope Beckles, he brought in Brian Manning, he brought back Amory Brown, and he signaled unity, and PNM supporters were happy to go and vote for the PNM at the end of the day. So
we had the edge on that, remember in 2017, Member of Parliament Ganga Singh at the National Assembly attempted to 2018, sorry, attempted to put a position to the party to reach out to all political entities and groups in a discussion to going forward in the election of 2020 as a unified force. And that was shut down unceremoniously. So while the PNM is showing the outreach, we are busy pushing away.
I just wanted to a comment was made as to whether or not I'm back at the UNC or am I still a UNC. In fact, I never left the UNC. Devant, through his mischievousness, at one point in time put out a video that I was supporting Gypsy in Maruga, which he knows not to be true, but I've forgiven him. But the reality is that I never left the UNC. And I agree with Devant. At the end of the day, this is a two-party system, and we must fight to ensure that we have two strong parties available to the population, because that's the only way we're going to improve the quality of people's lives in this country. You can't have one organization that is significantly stronger than the other, because you're going to have half the population being repressed as a result.
I see a question here, Vasant. Somebody asking me fun splash parties if I'm a UNC member. When I went into the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, I was asked as a member of the UNC to suggest anything about COP is just being ridiculous and reflective of our ignorance that is part of the propaganda that is being hurled at those who have.
You mean coming from the poolside at Bayside?
Yes, poolside at Bayside. But yes, this issue stems and emanates from the leadership and the leadership decisions. Yeah. And it is a common thread throughout the stewardship of Kamala Persad Bissessar for the last decade. And we saw it, I think, highlighted in the Parliament recently when Mrs. Persad Bissessar refused to allow Dr. Rowley to make up a statement on COVID. You recall that incident. Now, why would you make such a leadership decision when, one, the PNM have the majority in the House and could have overridden you with ease, which they did? And secondly, and I think this is the more important point, when the COVID point was being raised by the opposition itself on successive occasions and not being allowed, and here it is being addressed by the Prime Minister and you're shooting it down. And such an important issue that is an existential threat to Trinidad and Tobago and the world. It shows that the leadership makes wrong decisions for the wrong reasons. The Anil Roberts appointment to the Senate is a continuation of that, I think, disconnect from reality. And that is why an intervention like this, whether or not we win or lose, is irrelevant. But intervention itself is important.
Mhm. There's a saying that goes, "You're barking up the wrong tree." Given that Mrs. Persad Bissessar enjoys quite a fanatical following, how do you think that any of these conversations are going to make inroads?
Well, when I made the call for her to go within 48 hours of the election, to now I have seen a shift in the conversation of the membership. I have seen persons who have taken a 180 degree on the position. And I'm sure that my colleagues Vasant and Ramona and others who in exchange with persons across the board would have similarly seen that. And ultimately, all our members want the party to go back into power. They
Yeah.
want us because they believe in our approach towards governance in terms of people-centered, our approach to business. Persons could tell you when Vasant acted as finance minister and minister of trade, the amount of economic activity, the turnaround. Similarly for Ramona and other members of our team, our approach to governance, we were accessible. PS yourself,
Hmm.
how easy was it for you as a member of the PNM then as you were to approach me as a sitting member of the cabinet to talk about ideas that you have and compare it to your access now to your own PNM government. So people want that. Our memberships want that. And having faced 11 consecutive electoral defeats, they have to choose if they want a next one in 2025 or when the local comes around in 2022 or 23. And of course, we are not a national party, so we're not taking part in the THA. We will be a spectator on the side to see if Watson Duke beat them or not. And we will live vicariously through Watson Duke and his rantings. And that is not the way for a national party. We cannot be a communal party based in Dede and Philippines under the house of Kamla Persad Bissessar. Only today I understand that the party is moving its headquarters from Couva to San Fernando. So we are retreating further south. We are losing the ground that Basde Pandey fought so hard to carry us on the corridor.
There's a very interesting question from
Yeah.
Naika. Says, would any of you consider crossing the floor if the leadership does not change?
No.
I am in fun philosophically cannot agree with the PNM and their approaches. Knowing the history of the PNM in particular, it will be an anathema to my very fiber of being. So I'm content, and I've been in opposition more than in government. So this is familiar territory.
I have always been a UNC member, a life member of the UNC. I believe in their philosophy, and therefore I'll stay with the party, and we'll fight. We'll fight from the party, from within.
My father, as you know, PS, was one of the founding members of the Democratic Labour Party. He was a member of Parliament for St. Innocent from 1966 to 71. He was his party card for the UNC is 0001 actually.
Wow.
He was in Aranjuez. Of course, I'm a lifetime member of the party. I would like to stay with the party, grow the party, build the organization, make people proud of the organization, and get back into government. Because I think that whilst we were in government, we performed well. We did a lot. We improved a lot of people's lives across the board. Despite what people say that goods and services were not delivered to the East West Corridor, a lot of it was. It's just that we lost our way. That's a fact. We lost our way, and we lost credibility as an organization. And people felt that they could not trust us, and we have not done the work that's necessary. As in any endeavor, Pierce, as you know, as in any endeavor, if you are going to be successful, you've got to put in the work. Because if you fail to plan, you've got to plan to fail.
So I'm going to ask you all a very last question. So this is open to all of you. How can we improve the behavior that we see in Parliament, where we can have considered conversations across party lines Is it a change of behavior in Parliament that is needed?
I think that if you had the right leadership to start with, if you set the example, who was ever present in the Parliament, who was in a position to have brought on board the right caliber and quality of people, generally speaking. You're always going to have a few that may not be up to the right standard, but you could pull them. But where you have everybody at below par in terms of what's required for even understanding what parliamentary behavior is, then you would have a very difficult task. So I think leadership is at the core. Leadership is at the core of most things that we've been discussing here this evening. Leadership is at the core of success for our country. And surrounding yourself with the right people is I would say, more than 50% of the answer to your question.
Yeah, agreed. Let me also say some of the theatrics in the Parliament over the past couple of years have also been somewhat staged to a certain extent. The tantrums and so on both sides, both on the PNM side and the UNC side. Being a member of Parliament for the past 10 years, some of the theatrics and the dramatic responses and all of that, they've been staged and it's been intentional. And I guess that comes with the Westminster way of debate and our style. But Vasant is right. Sometimes we have to cross party lines for important pieces of legislation. And I would draw reference to the child marriage bill, the domestic violence bill, COVID. These things you need to get together as a government and an opposition because you are dealing with people. You need to put the country first. You need to put the people of Trinidad and Tobago first. And, that's the way we need to move.
The issue really, as Vasant correctly points out, is one of leadership. And that is why there's this push now following the election. There's a need for regime change, that only with that change in leadership would you see the rudder of the UNC alter in its direction. Its behavior in Parliament and its lack of discipline of its members and its behavior were all symptomatic of a weak, indecisive leadership. And that ultimately redound to defeat at the polls. And internal election or not, the agitation for that change in leadership has to go.
Well, thank you, all of you. A special thank you to our guests, Ramona, Vasant, Devant. Thank you, our viewers, for tuning in to yet another insightful episode of Caribbean Impact. Don't forget to like the page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This